welcome to this new idea. This is the 5th episode of this show, even though it's titled episode 4. We're still in the zeros phase of how the chapters are going to work out, because I'm still figuring everything out, and I'll probably relaunch it somewhat once everything gets settled. But for now, you're going to watch a live stream of a conversation between myself and my friend Christopher Reiger, who I'm going to introduce right now. He's nicely reading a book. Oh, hello. So I usually start these episodes with a quote, and we were talking about, what could be a interesting topic, and under Christopher's circumstances, interruption seemed like a really good place to start. And I searched through a couple of the books that I've been digging through for quotes for these episodes, and couldn't find something that was applicable for being interrupted and stoppage of movement. And despite these kind of books existing in many arrays of virtuality and physics and art and all things combined, I couldn't really find a quote that I thought was kind of good enough for a conversation about this. So we're going to just fly blind here with no initial frame of reference, and just dive in about what does it mean to have your process interrupted. So Christopher, I guess you're sitting in front of a nice wall of drawings there. How's that going?
I think the blank one is the best. That's what all the blank ones that you see there. Oh, the blank one. It's fine. I mean, I it's very frustrating. I just finished. The reason you see blank ones is I just finished studies for every blank piece on the wall behind me, but also the wall over there, which I'm not going to turn this all around. Uh-huh. And I'm super excited to dive into them, and then we hit this new normal.
Right.
When I was in my 20s, I was very focused on studio time, and so I had my day job, and I allotted a certain amount of time each week for socializing, which included like art openings mm-hmm. and hanging out with friends. But there wasn't that much of it. It was mostly like day gig and then studio time. And so being forced to work from home and not socialize much would have been a dream when I was, say, 28.
Right.
Because I would have been so incredibly productive, because my studio it's been at home for most of my adult life, not always, but more years at home than elsewhere. And so this would have been like a super fruitful period. But now in my early 40s, with 2 young kids who are at home with me because my wife is still working and working out of the house usually, it's not fruitful. If I had been less fruitful in terms of multiplying, I would be more fruitful in terms of the creative progeny right now. But,
yeah.
That's the awkward trade-off. So it's a lot has been interrupted, and I don't know for how long. And the uncertainty is vexing, because if I'm not making artwork or thinking about it might be enough. And there's just, my brain is so dysfunctional now because of this interruption that right. I have a hard time even thinking through ideas. I mean, not even art, just thinking through any concept or idea other than diaper changing. So it's tough, because I think there's a piece of my identity which is so tied to production,
right?
That it you can get sort of consumed in this interruption. But
when you go back, do you feel like these announcements of the school closures? Do you feel like you fully understood where you were going to be in a few weeks, or do you feel like it was a weird switch for your mind to go from your productivity and your scheduling to this new paradigm where all of that was out the window and you had to just kind of go day by day?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was so because my wife's in medicine, and she was saying that she felt before the official announcement of the closure that we were going to have a pretty strict closure that would be happening at some point.
Right.
I don't think she expected it to come as soon as it did in the Bay Area, because we were kind of ahead of the curve for compared to most of the country.
Right.
But but I was expecting that the initial, even with the initial announcement, I didn't think that we would be back in action by early April as was initially expected. And at this point, I'm not sure we'll be back in action come fall.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
but we'll see. I mean, certainly they have to relax some things. I mean, too many people are going to be feeling too much pain otherwise. But I think there'll be some form of social distancing or sheltering in place for the foreseeable future. Maybe relaxing and tightening, or relaxing and tightening. I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
going to be around for a while. So at this point, I'm just sort of. I mean, I think that when I first started conceiving of that, because of what she was telling me, I was within the space of an hour, maybe skeptical, then disgruntled, then horrified,
Right.
and then accepting. So it was a fast,
Yeah.
change. But I was like, well, shit, this is
Right. I think what I think I when everything started to happen, I think I immediately just shut down and worked in the yard. Like I did a bunch of things that I had been meaning to do for a really long time. Like my being productive didn't switch. It just rechanneled itself to this new thing. I don't have any children, and I'm sure it would have been forced to rechannel to that, but it was like I was supposed to go to work today, but I guess I'll just work on the sprinkler system that has been broken since we started renting this house.
absolutely.
And then it was maybe a week later when I started to address the fact that I wasn't going to have money. And oh, I need to make life changes. Like it did that took a while to set in. That this was, even though I kind of knew that it was going to be a long time, it was a weird switch for my brain to stop just doing what I normally do in a slightly different scenario.
Yep.
Like with scheduling and the problem solving all just kept going, but they were just misdirected.
Yep. Yeah. I'm not even misdirected because it's just a change direction. The problem is you're not being paid for it.
Right. Right.
That's the
Right, but and I think that there was especially with regards to the nonprofit work, I was immediately started to kind of go into problem solving mode with that, but all of that problem solving mode was like, how do we pause as much as possible and retain its momentum for when it can regain its momentum? How do we stop time? And that may or may not have been the right choice. I mean, I think everybody's going to be struggling with that.
yes. Yes, there's no question. I mean, it seems to me that you guys actually made a fairly smart play. I feel like art galleries and many arts nonprofits were left with so much uncertainty about setting the calendar.
Right.
And everyone was scrambling to come up with some way to deal with what was happening in the space at the moment,
Yeah.
and then what it looked like going forward. But I think everyone was initially pretty hopeful that by summer things would have some semblance of normalcy again, whatever
Right.
normalcy looked like. But I fear at this point, like everything is, I mean, people are pushing virtual exhibitions out into the fall, it seems. So it's,
Yeah.
we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
And how does it, I mean, arts nonprofits are one of the two nonprofit areas I'm most familiar with. I don't know how nonprofits stay afloat, because right now I'm getting tons of appeals from
Right.
nonprofits that I support, because they're all of a sudden worried about cash flow.
Sure.
But the people they're sending the messages to are not all, but many of the people that are receiving those missives are also seeing their cash flow suddenly decrease, in some cases greatly.
Yeah.
I don't make my art income fluctuates wildly and is not a substantial part of our household income.
Right.
But my design and illustration work is the piece that I bring to the table for household income, and it's still a small piece of it because I do spend more time, even before all this, with the kids. My wife is in medicine, and she makes the lion's share of her household income, and her income has been cut substantially by this. And so it's the world's smallest violin, because I still feel like we are fine.
Yeah.
I'm happy with the kids. Everyone's healthy.
Right.
There are financial options on the table, like mortgage forbearances and things of that sort. Which so we will get through this. Everyone is suffering, and most people are suffering much more acutely than my family is.
Sure.
But from a nonprofit's standpoint, how can you expect people to be opening their wallets right now when you
I
make
don't
those
know.
appeals?
Yeah.
You need, and we have in some cases, because I'm like, all right, we have this is not going to. How do you float it for an uncertain period of time?
Well, we were, I mean, weirdly, we were, to get back to the topic of this, in terms of Interruption, we were barreling towards this fundraiser that was supposed to happen a week and a half after things shut down.
Yep.
So we were, that was the first big, well, we got to move this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was, talking to all the people that we had made relationships with about how it's going to get moved. And then in short order, it's moved indefinitely. And then, I just was looking through our, for this fundraiser, we had all of these food and restaurant and beer donations. I mean, I wonder how many of those places are going to go under between now and when we actually have the fundraiser, tragically. Right? Yeah. So, we have gift certificates on file from restaurants that may never reopen.
Yep.
And, again, I have no idea when that fundraiser is going to be. I mean, there's people that are doing virtual fundraisers. I know that, SOX has virtual fundraiser this Saturday, and I think there's a few other organizations that are planning for their big galas to be in that vein of kind of an online auction.
Yep.
But I think organizations that are nimble enough to make that choice, for the most part, are going to be okay, no matter what the result.
Sure.
But yeah, man, what a strange scenario. Today, about a couple of hours ago, I found today was the anniversary of this photo I took at Aggregate Space right before we were about to build all the walls. We've been using it for years for fundraising, and it occurred to me that, like, I remember how we felt so stuck, like, we got to do something in this building, otherwise we will never be able to make it work here. And not knowing, I think I said something on the Facebook post, like, it's the feeling of opening a book to the first chapter and not knowing how many chapters are in it. And how right now I feel like a lot of people are in that situation. I, of course, am again with many aspects of my life, but what as somebody that plans things so thoroughly, what does this feel like for you? Right? Because I feel like I'm like Mr. Risk, and the vast majority of it is paid off in some way. Maybe not the way I'd hoped, but I'm definitely not the kind of person that sticks to a extremely rigid schedule and structures my life around that. I kind of roll dice a lot, and then figure out systems to agree with what looks like is going to work out. I'm more of a risk manager than a heavy long-term planner.
Right, and you risk manage exceedingly well. Both you and Willis do. But I think I'm compulsive, and I'm sort of stereotypically type A in terms of my planning. I think anyone who likes to plan realizes that their plans are always gonna get cocked up.
Right.
So even before this, I was like, yes, I always have everything planned out, like a day's schedule or a month's schedule, or when I'm doing this, that, or the other 3 months down the road. But I also accept that a lot of that's not going to fall into place exactly where I put it
right
in the calendar, and that's fine. I think this has been sort of a further. This has exaggerated that acceptance necessarily, because I think, like, when this first happened, I was like, I'm going to homeschool the kids. I created a daily schedule. This is what, for half an hour, from 7 to 9, we have, like, make the breakfast, get everything ready, get them dressed, get them clothed. 9 to 9:30 is like alphabet and numbers learning.
Right.
9 to 10, and I went all the way through 1 p.m. and then 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. was like free play and family time, usually outdoors. But it was all very, like, regimented throughout the day. And 3 weeks into that, it was like, this is not sustainable.
Right.
It doesn't work. It drives all of us crazy.
Right.
And now it's just like, get out in the yard and let's turn over some rocks and yell at each other.
Yeah.
And that's what we do all day, every day.
Yeah. And just for those watching, your kids are how old?
4 and just turned 2.
4 and 2. Yeah. So by yelling at each other is apropos for the age group.
Yes. Sorry, not yelling at my 18-year-old son. Yeah. So, I mean, I probably will be, but I'm not.
Yeah. We've talked about that.
When I say yell, it's usually them yelling at me.
Yeah.
Like my older son is we're reading Lord of the Rings right now after we finish The Hobbit. He'll charge me with a screw he's found in the dirt and like thrust it at me and scream like, "You're a black rider, I kill you." Actually, I'm just picking weeds, but that's what my day consists of.
Right.
But it's interesting. I mean, I think there is I am not the first person. There's like a whole cottage industry of think pieces now and papers and magazines about letting go of
right.
of your schedule, your carefully laid plans, your financial outlook, all of those things. Your 401k has gone to shit. Everyone is falling apart if you're blessed enough to have a 401k.
Yeah, right.
But everything is impossible to predict at this point. And there is a lot of good. I mean, there are many silver linings to all of this. There are also many pretty dreadful possibilities associated with all of this. I try to focus on the positive, and as far as my interruptions and my relationship to scheduling and planning, which has always been very concrete, I think it's probably for the best that I have to deal with this, stretch of uncertain duration where I just day after day is just whatever comes.
Roll with it, yeah.
I mean, the downside is I come in the studio and on the one hand, it's a place where I can retreat and have a moment's peace.
Mm-hmm.
The kids often run in here with me, but if I keep them out, it's sort of like a quiet refuge. But then I also I know that I don't have any time to actually settle into working on anything.
Right.
Although some of I'm now starting to take contract jobs again, and so I'll be back in here in the evening doing illustration work and things like that. But that's still not. It doesn't scratch the itch in the same way. Even if it's a really satisfying contract, it's satisfying in that it means money. It's not satisfying that I'm not diving into my own pieces.
Right.
But it's again. I feel self-conscious griping about any of this because ultimately it's a massive interruption for me, but everyone is healthy. We will get through because of what my wife does. God knows not what I do, but because of what my wife does, and medicine will land on our feet somewhere eventually. Yeah. So I'm not, might not be here, but like somewhere we will land on our feet. So it's not. I'm not worried in an existential way. I am just. I'm worried more for society at large in an existential way, but in an individual way, I'm like what will come will come.
Yeah, Willis and I had this conversation earlier today about our conversations keep going back and forth. Like, is it okay that we're doing less than we normally do? Is it okay that we're watching, more episodic television? Because we were on a run of averaging 70 hours of work a week. Like, both of us were working full-time jobs and spending 25 to 30 hours on the nonprofit, plus, other responsibilities to friends and social engagement. So it was like, and we started talking about it, and like, really, we hadn't, we had a couple of, we had a vacation the last 2 years in a row. And that's the first time either of us had more than a week vacation. I mean, neither of them were a week. They were 9 days. It was the first time we had a vacation since we've known each other, and first time I've had one since, summer vacation before I went to college. So, I mean, there's like a 20-year run there of kind of busting our asses, and we're kind of justifying this somewhat as a sabbatical, as like, this is we're gonna get things together. And I've been reorganizing large chunks of my life that haven't been organized in a decade. I mean,
I think that's the healthiest way to view this.
yeah. So it's like I spent an afternoon last week reorganizing this series of junk drawers that have traveled with me for the last few years, and it was just get a trash can, get an electronics recycling bin, and let's just get through this and think about what's going to go in the fire, what's going to go in the trash, and I'm creatively I've been not particularly active these last few years, minus writing assignments for aggregate or writing assignments for some other stuff, and then this coming up with this and executing this has been quite it's a bit of a learning curve, because I'm here alone with trying to maintain technology. And if you watched the last episode with Toria Cummings, my technology had a weird hiccup in the middle, and I was just doing my best to be attentive despite panic that it was like not recording anymore, even though it was. So there's this moment, from about minute 18 to like minute 26, where I'm nodding and smiling and saying but like reaching around the side of the camera to all these pieces of technology that are controlling what's happening and try to like make sure it still works, which then made me execute my Best Buy credit card to purchase a piece of technology that would hopefully prevent that from happening in the future. Because I think it was the worst moment of this so far, but it was really just because I wasn't paying attention and had to pretend like I was. So I don't know. I mean, I think my interruption is more. I'm trying to just celebrate it, and maybe you are too. I mean, I guess that was where your explanation went towards the end of that you were just you're gonna just roll with it after your 3 weeks of attempting to lock it down.
You're trying to celebrate? Is that what you
said? Yeah, I'm trying to celebrate the fact that I've been given an opportunity to take a break. Yes. And I wouldn't have taken one otherwise. Absolutely. Would not have done it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you in particular, along with Willis and a few other people I know, are extremely hardworking and driven. Oftentimes, to perhaps your detriment, say psychologically or physically.
Yeah, maybe.
Your ass off to a point of exhaustion, and I think something like this is probably good for you, depending on how long it lasts. Like, you're a productive person. At some point, you're going to want to be. I mean, as you said, you just redirected your productivity. It's not like you've ceased productivity, but at the same time, at some point you're going to want to direct back. And if you're unable to, it's going to be extremely vexing for you. And I think that's true for me too. But celebrate. It's interesting because I feel like it is. When I talk to friends who aren't local, occasionally on the phone, like checking in, how you doing? They're like, well, I feel almost guilty, but I'm okay.
Right.
I feel like it's hard. At first, I'm like, I don't know if I use the word celebrate, but it is. This is a remarkable opportunity, and it is worthy of celebrating. The remarkable opportunity we've all been granted to slow down and just refocus, redirect, and slow down. And that's something that many of us would never ever do of our own accord.
Yeah.
And so that's really great. So that is worthy of celebration.
Yeah, I mean, you get a, I mean, I think, for you with your kids, this is it's an interesting place to be in as a parent right now, right? Because they were with childcare or preschool or.
One was in preschool and one was in childcare,
right?
Daycare. And,
part-time.
What's that?
Part-time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but they're both now here full-time.
Right.
And I mean, it is interesting. I mean, you think. So I was having a conversation with another parent who was like, 150 years ago, kids were homeschooled most of the time. I mean, literally a little more than 150, but like the concept of public schools wasn't something which was ubiquitous. So they were mostly homeschooled, and they were home all the time until they were older. And even when they were older, they were mostly working within the context of what their father or mother did, sometimes in an apprenticeship situation. But it was a very different world. But my counter observation was that they were also raised quite differently.
Right.
So today there's more of a dynamic that parents have with their kids of not quite equals. We still have our rules and our guidelines that they have to follow, and we still call the shots.
Right.
But there's much more of a. It's almost like we're parents and friends, even for small children.
Right.
And I feel like homeschooling someone with whom that dynamic exists is much harder than when all the children were like, yes, sir, no, ma'am,
Right.
with their parents, and had a very sort of regimented dynamic, and they were expected to be helping with chores at age 3 in productive ways.
Yeah, and they were scared shitless of their parents.
No question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I said that to this one person. I was saying, like, we can do this. We can homeschool. And I was like, the discipline was very different for, I think, even for most contemporary homeschooled kids. I would imagine that the level of discipline and expectation for them is different.
Right.
Maybe not all, but for most. And I think that's been a tough adjustment, not just for me, but for the kids, knowing that I'm expecting them to be able to sit down and focus on something for half an hour.
Right.
At 4 and 2, especially at 2, that's a ludicrous assumption. But maybe it wasn't 150 years ago. It was like, you're going to go entertain yourself for half an hour while your older sibling does something else with me that's productive.
Right.
But now, like, you can't expect more than 4 minutes of some other focus. So I think it is interesting. I mean, since the last time society at large has done something like this, a lot has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true of parenting. It's true of many other arenas too. And I think we're kind of it's a real shock to the system to realize, on the one hand, to be like, well, this isn't brand new. People did this for eons.
Right.
But then realize, oh shit, they did it under very different circumstances and social structure and expectations.
Yeah.
It's a curious set of both assumptions and
circumstances.
And sort of clusterfuck reactions.
Right.
The assumptions keep proving wrong.
Well, I think that there's there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I think my mom was home. I don't think I did preschool until I was 5. So I was home, in that age has moved younger and younger and younger over the years. But yeah, I don't remember that period of time in my life, so I have no judgment on how it went. But I imagine that the creative side in me was flourished at that point. I mean, I'm sure that there was other stuff that flourished. And I know that you have property enough and placeful enough to like explore. Which I think was an important part of both of our youths, that we were in places that had access to large stretches of land to go and be in.
Right, and I think that is one of the biggest positives from a parenting perspective of this for me. Once I got past my crazy rigid homeschooling schedule, once I realized that was not going to pan out, most of my day to day is going out in the yard with the kids and insisting, especially as a 4-year-old, that he just go off and do his own thing. He's welcome to come check in with me. I tell him where I'm going to be. I tell him what I'm going to do. I mean, it's half an acre. It's not a huge area, but it's big enough that he can go around the corner or behind a bush and be sort of out of sight, out of mind, and do his own thing, which frustrating usually entails killing things, which is fairly common with little boys, but it's distressing. It's you catch up with him, you hear like a banging, and he's crushing a slug with a stone, and then you're just like crazy, awful things. Like, what are you doing? It's like psycho. But I think it's unfortunately totally but at the same time, I'm like, I don't like the killing, but at least he's going off and he has detached from me enough to sort of engage the world with no structure. So it's not like he's at preschool. Okay, there's this time, and then we do a song and dance, and we sing, and one entertainment or engagement after another. And now it's like, no, you got to sit with your lack of a schedule, with your boredom, as some people might say,
Yeah.
and go figure out what to do with that time that's actually exciting to you or satisfying to you. Hopefully, it's not always killing some poor creature. So hopefully, it's doing something more interesting, like building something or digging something up. But I do like that he's able to. It seems over these however many weeks it's been, 5 or so, been able to detach a little bit and spend more time on his own.
Mm.
And maybe that's going to offer a huge benefit, because I mean, as like you, I didn't go to preschool until I was 5, and then kindergarten started,
Yeah.
and before that, I spent a lot of time just on my own. I mean, I'm an only child, but my parents were both doing their work, and so I just hung out and somehow survived.
Yeah.
And I think it's largely what made me a relatively creative person, is that I just spent a lot of time thinking and wandering off in the woods, and hopefully, I mean, this isn't the woods, but it's a half acre. But
Yeah.
Hopefully his slug crushing will generate future ideas that we'll be able to use.
The more future mortician. What? So do you fear? I mean, I guess this is a question for your art practice as well as your kids going back. I mean, is there going to be now that we have this taste of this other life, is there going to be problems reincorporating ourselves into the rest of society? Like, now that he's that window has been opened to playing in the yard by yourself, is that going to be closable? And just like for you, is now that this window of I'm going to go and just kind of do what I want for the next 4 hours with my kids, sort of, is that going to close? Or for me, is the ability to continue to reorganize all the things that I've set aside for the last few years, for the last 9, 10, 20 years, like, is that reorganization going to be able to continue once society, resparks, the engine starts going again?
I don't think any of us have a good answer. I do think kids, they're so young and they're so malleable. I think they will snap into whatever there might be a period of adjustment over a month or two, but I think it won't be hard for them to accept whatever the new normal is. I think for us, it is interesting. I mean, I don't, as me individually, I'm already kind of a hermit. There are people I like spending time with, but I also really like being alone in the studio and reading books and sort of being out on my own in the woods. And so in some ways, it'll be back to the same for me. I'm forced to spend time with my children and wife every day, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think, as you well know, I see people once in a blue moon, too rarely in the case of people like yourself or Willis, but I am something of a hermit. So it probably won't change me that much, but I do wonder about, like my wife, for example. We've talked about after the air clears, as it were, we don't even travel much. Like, we travel maybe twice a year to see my parents in Virginia, and usually like a couple times to San Diego, where she has a lot of family, but not much. But even cutting back more and just making, local trips, just like somewhere you can drive and within your greater county, or like the Bay Area at large, and just not sort of scaling back the expectations about how far you can go and how much you can do.
Right.
And I think that might do us all a world of good. I mean, not just her, not just our family, but I think that might be true for a lot of people, and that might be a good thing. Whether you're talking about climate emissions or just naive. Well, I'm betraying my own beliefs, but what I view is like naive ideas about endless economic growth. Sort of scaling expectations back a little bit, or recalibrating them in ways that could be really healthy for our society. Maybe. The only catch is that I said the same damn thing in 2008, and I remember my parents saying the same thing in 1989. So I feel like, we didn't take advantage of those opportunities. They were different, admittedly, but we have squandered past opportunities to sort of recalibrate things in a more equitable, paced way, and we will probably squander this one too.
Yeah,
Yay!
yeah, hooray! But we had it. I mean, at least we had it. Like, I mean, I think I was too screwed in 2008 to even really pay attention, other than I knew that it changed my trajectory drastically. Like, I really thought I was going to teach. And now I hope I'm going to teach. But then I thought, like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to get all the things I need to do, and just couldn't make it happen. And, now I still have... I mean, it took me, 6 or 8 years to even get my teaching career going, and now it's like, running on fumes already.
And now one of the places that you've taught and your alma mater is...
Right. Yeah. Everything's a mess. But I interviewed this past week with a position, and they were like, we're still looking to hire, but everything's been, the timeline is stretched out. So it was nice to talk to you, but I don't know when and if we'll ever get back to you. It was like that kind of conversation. I mean, what do we, as people that rely on a series of structure, right? I think I had this quote from The Elegant Universe, or one of Brian Greene's books, when I talked to Tori about the things that we've come to expect, which is how how science is built, where you assemble the expectations, you evaluate them, you assemble a formula, you use that to predict. What can we, how do we use this to predict better? How do we use this opportunity to, in both our practice and both our lives, what about this do we use to augment expectation in the future? Is that too
Is it too what?
too complicated of a thing?
No. I mean, I don't know that I have a good. I certainly don't have a pithy answer. It's tough. I mean, I think from an individual or personal perspective, my practice is so rooted in like natural history and place and animal species anyway, that none of that really changes by this.
Right.
The rest of the world, the non-human world, is going on without, or keeping on without a lot of change. Maybe a fewer humans actively, in their space, but not a lot else has changed there. And so I think my relationship with my work won't, like the actual practice of making the work and the ideas won't change, but I do wonder about the way that work then engages the world. Will the structures that allow that work to show and to be seen and talked about and discussed and sold, ideally, since we all need to make money, will those change in substantial ways? Like, will the art world have anything like the structure it's had?
I don't think so.
I think it's going to be fundamentally altered.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think we're going to see some pretty permanent changes. And I can't hazard a guess.
Right.
I think art nonprofits like ASG will actually be less I mean, every nonprofit, as we discussed at the start, is going to be hammered by this, but I feel like it conceptually and in terms of their mission, they are less affected by this than standard galleries and museums.
Right. But like that's gonna be so based on locality, and I think America is gonna fall so far behind, because whatever that there was, a bunch of cities had initiatives to raise money for the arts. New York City raised $75 million, LA raised 10, Bay Area raised 2.5, and by Bay Area I mean San Francisco only. So you end up in the situation where the weak crumble, the big crash and crumble, the ones that have huge existing trusts shrink, and anything that doesn't have I mean, all of us don't have state all of us don't have federal funding. We have minimal federal funding because the NEA doesn't really do as much as it used to. But it's going to be the cities that have that bandwidth. So it's going to just go back to being major cities, and smaller cities are going to just, everything's going to shrink up and disappear.
Yes, I mean, I agree. I think with the exception of some smaller cities that have built robust arts structures, which are very rare, but they do exist in the States. And I think it's like Grand Rapids, Michigan. I think has a crapload of like public arts funding. Like, you know, and I think it, you know, I mean, it's sort of like looking at the country at large with health support and social safety networks. If we don't build the structures for them, then when shit hits the fan, everyone feels the burn in a pretty terrible way. If you have those in place, when the shit hits the fan, everyone feels the burn, but it doesn't kill, you know, 3/4 of the body. Like, the body will be able to continue. And I feel like we're seeing in the States at large, and I'm not anti-capitalist, I'm not, but I feel like the States has largely misplaced its priorities in terms of building, not just for the arts, but on all, everything from healthcare to the environment. I mean, in so many levels, things are just prioritized around each of us getting our own, and corporations and making more money and economic growth. And I think, you know, maybe that's what we have a chance to see, in the same way that the art world is going to have a massive, you know, reckoning because of this. Maybe more of it will have a reckoning. Maybe more of society at large. But we'll see. I mean, they're also, you know, I mean, you have case studies, and then from a removed, if I can remove myself from all the personal suffering that is going to happen because of this, whether because of illness or because of financial distress, I think it's curious that we can look at some European states and some African states and Central American, South American states, and the U.S. and Canada, and compare all these different systems, which are all like different stages of the way they've built these states, these social projects, and to see how each of these places comes out of something like this, of a pandemic situation. A pandemic that fortunately doesn't seem like it's going to have a hugely high fatality rate, but still one that has fundamentally transformed commerce and our social relationships and everything, education, and see what systems are most robust overall. Like, what percentage of the body survives? If you cut off the head to keep the feet alive, that fucking sucks. You know? Great.
You know, and then we're looking at a situation where, especially arts, are going to be supported by the countries that are taking all this seriously. So, you know, I mean, so if everything freezes, it's going to come back first in, you know, Germany and South Korea and, you know, and the countries that have handled this thoughtfully, and, you know, those are going to be the first places that reopen. I mean, you know, New York will recover from this, but it's not going to be in the short term, and it's not going to be the same. You know, I mean, I don't know how you lived in New York for what, half a decade. I mean, you know, how is that gonna? How do you see that city coming back from this?
I don't know. It's going to be strange. I mean, I think New York is some of the stereotypes that New Yorkers have about themselves, I think, hold true. I think it's, you know, sort of like, it's a resilient city. I think New Yorkers are resilient, partly because of its great diversity and partly because of how fucking hard so many people work who are first and second generation immigrants, which is not a small percentage of the city, or people who come from elsewhere in the country from hard scrabble upbringings and work their ass off to achieve, you know, something in New York. I think all that's true. I think the city will recover, but like Broadway is, like, when you think of New York, you think of certain iconic structures, you think of Broadway. Broadway is I don't know how that's going to look. That whole business model, I mean, it's like a restaurant almost. Like it's basically a service and entertainment industry, and I think I worry about most restaurants. I worry about Broadway. I worry about how the recovery is going to look for them, because I think it might fundamentally, it might limit things, so you only have the existing behemoths that survive. And then I don't know. I mean, who knows? Like, I have no I'm imaginative about animals. I don't really understand economy, so,
Right.
so my crystal ball is pretty hazy. But I feel like it is a lot of the things we think of. I mean, New York is all about like density.
Yeah.
Well, social distancing, some degree of that might be in place for a long time, and even psychologically, we might all be a little less game about getting on a packed, like sardine packed subway car. Which
Right.
was one thing that I loved about New York was like, standing there, like twice as crowded as Muni, and still reading my book and like, cramped up, and it somehow felt wonderful.
Right.
And I feel like that is might be less common. I mean, it might become more class divided. That
Yeah.
the subway truly only becomes a method of transportation for the have-nots, and
Yeah.
taxis and Lyft and Uber and their own, chauffeur-driven limousines become the transportation of the haves. I mean, I do worry about in the States this whole thing creating even more inequity,
Right.
and more social division. And if you have more of that in a city like New York, that's toxic long term. I mean, you end up with an escape from New York scenario,
Right.
50 years from now. So
Yeah. When the rich people leave and just abandon it.
right, right.
Oh man.
I mean, that's the other. So, as an aside with New York, I hadn't thought about this in the context of this idea in the context of coronavirus. But there was an article, I think, in the New York Times or the Atlantic, and I honestly haven't read a complete article because I can't get this is the longest uninterrupted chunk of time I've had in a while. And so like Elizabeth is down with the kids. I have my beat. I'm very happy right now.
Give her a big hug and a kiss for me.
Yeah, I'll give her a high five. Like, thank you. I skim read like the first 5 paragraphs of most articles, and then make a bunch of assumptions that are probably entirely incorrect based on those 5 paragraphs. But there was a thing talking about how an article in one of those publications talking about how we're seeing more flight from the cities. So people who have the ability to leave cities because of coronavirus are like they're going to their second homes if they're wealthy or truly wealthy. But even if they don't have second homes, they're already thinking about moving back to Grand Rapids, Michigan, or to Kalamazoo, wherever it might be. I don't know these are all Michigan cities I'm coming up with, but like they're leaving New York.
Ann Arbor, they're going back to.
Everyone's going to Michigan. But the idea is like there's this idea that like, oh, I can go to the suburbs or go to rural America, depending on their individual comfort with it. But I fear that what might come of this is the rebirth of cities that we've had for a couple of decades now could begin to go back in that other direction where people are like, oh, population density, it's frightening.
Yeah.
Immigrants, like sort of some of these fans, I mean, some of the flames are already being fanned by our current political scene. So I don't know. It's worrisome, but there's also some positives, right? I mean, I try to remind myself there are potential positives that can come out of this.
Yeah, I mean that's what you got to focus on. I mean, at least if you're thinking through the problems, you got to try to address that. I mean, I don't. Moving to Vallejo wasn't a goal of mine. It was to solve a very particular problem, and I'm really lucky that I'm here instead of where I could have been.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's, and I'm sure you keep talking about this similar things. I think everybody that is in a situation that even has a tiny little bit of good news in it is focusing on that and is focusing on the how lucky they are to do X while other people are in a different situation. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, like to keep swinging it back to like this idea of interruption, does interruption have a different definition if it's the catalyst for a complete change? I mean, do you feel like this is an interruption, or do you feel like, particularly with your art practice, with the way in which you're thinking through ideas, do you see that going back to where it was? Or do you see that going? Are you just hopeful?
I think it's interesting because interruption is an interesting word. Like if you break it down, I mean, there's like it's an intense word. It is a hard stoppage. It is it sounds like eruption, and I think for a good reason if you look at the roots of the word. And I think I would say for my art practice, it's more of an unexpected and unwanted pause right now.
Right.
That might change. There might be more like as this extends, there might be like I might think about things if I find time to think that allows my art practice to evolve or change in some meaningful way. Right now, it seems like the pause button has been hit because as soon as I have time to be making work again, I'm going to pick up those 7 studies that I just finished and I'm going to run with them. Maybe I'll start doing that and say, like, oh, this is all so shallow and empty. I need to like reconsider all this. But right now, I don't think so. I think I'm going to be very happy back in the studio and painting and feeling good about things. But for our life as a whole, for society, for my family, etc., I do think it is more of an interruption in the sense that things are not gonna get back. I mean, I think these like ridiculous armed public protests that are happening around the country are really people responding. So there are people, again, under great financial stress and becoming homeless overnight. I mean, it is rough. Those aren't actually most of the people that are standing with guns on the steps of city halls around the country.
No.
I think
they just want to go to the bar.
What's that?
Those people just want to go to their fucking bar and hit on the waitress.
Yeah, exactly. That 9 out of 10 just want to
that they're pissed. Yeah, they're pissed because they're stuck at home with their wives.
Yeah, which is apparently its own like thing that people are so frustrated to be at home with their wives. I feel what that means in terms of like spousal abuse and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's horrors in that are not to be smiled about. But again, you and I are lucky that we have partners that complement us, and we can provide for in ways that they appreciate, and they can provide for us in ways that Willis is literally in the other room sewing the 5th version of a new mask for me, because all of my P95s that I gave to you are yeah. Well, I kept 3 for myself, and then did a bunch of woodworking, and now they're all just like dirt piles.
To clarify, just for listeners, they're not for me.
Yeah.
I'm not using them.
That's right.
For my grocery store.
That's right. Yes, I said P95s to your wife in medicine.
Yeah, so they are all under practice in the hospital now.
Ah, that's fantastic.
Fantastic. And someone 3D printed a bunch of face shields for her about 2 weeks after yours arrived. So about a week ago. So now she has a bunch of face shields and masks. Huge help.
Oh, great! That's great. Yeah. So, but Willis, she our sewing machine broke. Jesus, when was that? It was at SFAI. Our sewing machine broke. We brought it there to sew something, and it didn't turn on, and we just threw it out. So it was November, and we'd been meaning to get one for a while, and I don't know if Amazon. I don't know if they lowered the price, but we bought a very good sewing machine for about $130 from Amazon a week ago.
$30?
$130.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, still, like, it's a very good
That's
sewing
awesome.
machine, and we immediately, dove into both trying to remember how to use a sewing machine, and 3 days later, Willis is on her, I think, 4th mask.
That's awesome.
That we just augmented the most recent one to accommodate this beak here, and then the lack of this. So it's like a different type of, we took the male mask and then made it, like Conrad Meyers / Jeff Goldblum sized nose.
It's more male here and less male there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more like a bird. But yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, that wasn't even on my radar. She's doing it in part because she wants to, be able to be safe and wear the right stuff and feel like she solved problems in a particular way that excited her mentally while she was working on it, and there's safety that we're relying on each other. I mean, what was the digression there? Oh yeah, the lunatics that hate their wives.
Right. I think like March, so they're protesting not being able to go to a bar. I agree with that, but they're also protesting, I think, just fear of the unknown. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're angry because they don't know what comes next.
Right.
And to some extent, we all are. I mean, not angry, but we're all experiencing that fear. But I mean, it's a natural human reaction. It's a dangerous one, but it's a natural human reaction to react with anger to it. But I think there's this desire for people just to like go right in the same way that I said my studio practice might be a pause. I think people want this to be a pause, not an interruption.
Yes.
Because in interruption, we don't go back to what we had before. And I think socially, it is an interruption.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people, so many, are reacting with anger and fear. The coronavirus itself aside, which is scary in its way, but I think what is more scary is this just unknown circumstance and what comes after this. How long will the pandemic last? And what will society look like?
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. That's a good place to end it. It is going to be interesting. Thank you so much, man. It's been a while, and I owe you at least a couple of emails. And I don't know. We should go drive somewhere in the North Bay, and stand 8 foot apart and wave at each other.
We can just drive and then lay next to each other and keep waving.
Go fit. We could go fishing. Are you fishing?
I have not gone. I would love to, but I have not gone because I've been. Well, so in Sonoma County, everything is closed.
Oh, right.
So everything, like all parks, regional parks, city parks, they closed everything. So you can only be on the roads. But I know the other counties that's not true.
And so we go further north.
Yeah.
Find a.
Or even like Contra Costa, and nothing's.
Oh, so wait. So Contra Costa. Do you know? We should save this. We'll save this conversation for another time and/or offline because we don't need to talk about places to fish.
Yes, we don't talk about fishing
on this new idea. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
It sounds good.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.
So thank you, anybody watching still, for joining Christopher Reiger and myself on this new idea, talking through interruption, what this current climate means, and how to apply some of these ideas to life, economics, the world, all the things that are a little too big to comprehend right now. But I hope if you watch this, you had a good time, and if you or yourself would like to participate, please give me a call, and we'll try to do our best to accommodate. I'd love to talk to some more people. Until next time, thank you for watching this new idea.